If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today I'm joined by Professor Tim Gabbett, a world-renowned sports scientist with over 30 years of experience as a performance consultant for high-performance organizations around the globe. Tim holds a PhD in human physiology and a second PhD in applied sports science, specializing in physical demands, injury prevention, and skill acquisition. He's published over 300 peer-reviewed articles and has presented at more than 400 national and international conferences. In fact, a recent study of 8 million scientists published in PLOS Biology named him among the top 10 most impactful sports scientists of all time. In this episode, we dive into how managing your training load can help reduce injuries, optimize performance, and keep you active for life. If you've ever wondered how to train smarter and stay injury-free, whether you're an elite athlete or just trying to stay fit as you age, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's get started. Welcome to the show today. I'm really excited to have my friend here, Professor Tim Gabbett. I've just been hired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. We've moved up to Canada. We were building our program to reduce injuries and optimize performance and shift how this 100-year-old organization approached their athlete care. And we were really revolutionizing that within the NHL. And we built the rehab programs. And I came across an article that you had written, and it was titled, "Have You Done Enough to Return to Play?" It really clicked that that's what we were missing, because there's such a difficult decision to be made around, have you done enough? You know, how do you make that decision objectively to say, yes, this athlete can go back and play in their sport? And so I read the article, fantastic. We started thinking about it. And then I actually got a letter from you, to say, hey, I'm going to be in North America. But that's when we connected and we had you come in that off season. And it was transformational for our program. It rounded out everything we'd been trying to do. And we went after that, we went 3.5 years without having a single injury. It really made us an elite program.
Yeah. Well, look, I remember reaching out to you, but there was a reason for that as well, because I was aware of the work that you'd done with your PhD as well. So, I figured if anyone could actually make the leap and actually integrate some of the work into hockey, it would be you. There's a lot of people who read those papers. There's a lot of people who stop at the title or the abstract as well and don't read the whole thing. But you were one of the people that I figured I can actually help this guy with his program, because he's smart enough to understand what to bring in and what to leave out. So yeah, it was a no-brainer to go in there because of you were the person running the program. And there's only a few places around the world that are really good like that. You can see from the outside the difference that can be made.
Yeah, well, I appreciate those kind words, Tim. It was it was obvious right away, I think, that it was going to integrate into what we did in a really seamless way. We had unbelievable staff there with Ryan Morrison leading up the physical therapy, who was a very forward-thinking, action-oriented
physical therapist, and that doesn't always happen. We had Matt Herring doing the strength and conditioning, very collaborative, very forward thinking, and so how we were able to work together as a team to build that program and then integrate new concepts like this to level them up. So often you grab onto a new thing and that's it. This is what we're doing. But to be able to integrate it and add it to a program, I think that's where it was a real force multiplier for us.
Yeah. I mean, and to have the success that you had in creating robustness and resilience in that group, it doesn't happen by accident, right? You don't, and it's not something that you can say, all right, well we've done that now. We've done load management. It either worked or it didn't work. It's an ongoing daily thing where, and it's not just something where you tick a box and say, oh, we tried that and it did work.
Right.
We tried it didn't work. And then you move on to the next thing. Load management is, and it's not what the media would say. You weren't just resting players. I remember going in there and you were finding ways in a congested schedule, and hockey and basketball are two great examples of a congested schedule where you're competing a lot. You were finding ways to get doses of training, and they were micro doses, but they were still doses, and that's where I think a lot of teams fall down is they do a lot of competing, and they forget the training component, the preparation component of it. They kind of, and by the time you get to week 3, the game itself is not enough to develop specific physical qualities.
So that's a really good segue for me, Tim. Like, we could talk about this until the cows come home. We've got a ton of experience working in pro sport, actioning this. But what I really want to do is I want to show people, all of our listeners everybody's highly active. They're really focused and interested in investing in their health. And they're looking for all of these ways to stay active as long as they can. So this, for me, is one of the key concepts that we can translate from pro sport into the real world. And the thing that highlights it for me, Tim, is, we see all these headlines, speaking of the media sort of not really doing justice to this kind of topic, millions of dollars a year in injuries from people playing pickleball. Right? People start pickleball and thousands of people getting hurt, tearing Achilles, tearing the hamstrings, shoulder problems, all this stuff. And when you see a headline like that, we can really start to believe, or it's being portrayed as though getting off the couch and participating in sport is bad for you. Like, pickleball is inherently a dangerous hobby for someone to take up versus sitting on the couch and getting like metabolic disease. So I think what we should do is let's talk about what is training load.
I think the easiest way to talk about training load is both in terms of external and internal. So if we think about the work that you do, the weight that you lift, the distance that you run, the number of times you swing a racket, these are all examples of external training load, and they're the things that it's the work that we do in preparing for the activities that we're about to undertake. Now, it doesn't training load doesn't have to be limited to sport. We can think about it in sporting terms, but we can think about it in terms of someone who has a physically vigorous job that they have to do a lot of lifting, they have to do a lot of digging. So that's an example of load or external load. And then you have the internal load. And an internal load is essentially just the response to external load. So you and I could both be digging a hole, or you and I could both be lifting in the gym or running a certain distance. it could be the exact same external load. We could be both running 5 miles, but the internal response is what makes it an individualized load. It could either be
Yeah.
either really high for me. It could be my heart rate is really high, or my perceived effort is really high, or for you it could be
Mhm.
really low. So what we think about is internal load is what drives adaptation, right? So if you want to develop aerobic adaptations, if you want to develop aerobically, then there's a certain range that you might want to sit within. We use external load as a dial to dial up or down
Mhm.
internal adaptation. So if the
Right.
internal load is way too high for effective aerobic adaptations, then we just dial down the external load to get the internal
Mhm.
adaptation.
So you're a big time runner, right? I watch you and your son race all the time, and you know you're cardiovascularly very fit. I see you on your trips all around the world, and you're running a marathon in every city. I'm more of a lifter and sort of power related guy, so I don't do a lot of distance aerobic, right? So your capacity for that, if you and I go for a run together, we're going to have completely different experiences of that run, right? So my internal load, if we go for a run, same speed, same distance, my heart rate's going to be higher. My perception of it's going to feel a lot harder because I've not done a lot of that. So my training level in that specific activity is actually quite low, even though I'm pretty fit overall.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think if you take it the next step, you bring me you said that you're a strength power guy, right? So you take me into
Mm-hmm.
the weight room, take me into the gym, and we let's say you load the bar up really heavy. Um,
Right,
you might be working at a lower percentage of your 1 rep max, whereas I might be
right,
I might be operating at close to 95, 97%. So it's the internal load for me.
right.
The external load, the weight on the bar is exactly the same, but the internal load is a lot
Mm-hmm.
higher.
And I think that really speaks to sort of both the individual nature of training load and also each individual, why it's so individualized, how we're susceptible to injury.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the key principles of training is individuality, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that the exact same external load can bring about a different response for different individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's why we try our best within a team environment. We're trying to individualize training programs, which is difficult when you have
Right,
let's say we've got a roster of 50 NFL players.
right,
It's
right.
difficult to do
Mm-hmm.
that. It's not impossible, but and there's ways you can
Mm-hmm.
do it. But essentially, that's what we try and do, even with our older athletes, the athletes who are training for longevity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we still
Right.
try and individualize their programs.
And so then I think that then takes us to this natural progression into now we sort of understand what training load is, internal, external. What is load management?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one because I'd been tracking players' training loads in
Mm-hmm.
competition and in training for I don't know, long time. We'd been doing it prior to wearables. We would use video
Mm-hmm.
analysis. Prior to that, we would use some subjective scales of monitoring training. It's really
Yeah.
important to keep in mind that when most people think about load management, they think rest. Right. This is I think what the
Right.
media
Right.
have
Exactly.
grabbed onto, that load management means rest, it means sitting players out. Now, if
Yeah.
if I think about training load, and training and let's call it load management, whatever you want to call it, what I'm talking about is using well-established principles of training to get
Mm-hmm.
athletes really great performance levels. Now, when you think about training
Right.
principles, we're thinking about progressive overload, We want to load a little bit more than our current capacity so that we can improve our capacity. Our
Right.
capacity.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We have specificity in that if you want to be a runner, then you're probably going to have to run. If you want to be strong, you're probably going to have to lift.
Right.
We
Right.
talk about individuality, and we've discussed that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about reversibility, that if you don't use it, you lose it. Variation in training, that you have
Right.
highs and lows.
Right.
And
Yeah.
one of the key principles of training is recovery. But you'll notice that I've listed another 5 before I even mentioned recovery. So recovery or rest isn't the whole load management puzzle. It's part of the jigsaw, but it's just one piece.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so the reality is the media have latched on to the rest and recovery component. But in my experience, the teams are doing a lot more than that. It's the last lever that they pull to sit someone. It's kind of the last lever they pull. There's a lot of other levers that pull before they get to that.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting concept, and I'm seeing it a ton out of sport into the real world, where people will, both in rehab and in injury type situations, where people will go to the doctor or they'll go to the physical therapist. They'll have a sore Achilles, or they'll have some ache and pain, and so the instruction they're given is rest until it stops hurting, and then it stops hurting, and what do? Great, jump right back into my pickleball lessons for 3 hours. No surprise there that it jumps right back up, right? And so I think that's where that rest piece it's a negative adaptation, actually, when you look at the demands of what the people are actually trying to do.
Well, there's a couple of points in there, Jez, and one is for a period of time, you might have to rest. You might have to you might have to regress your training loads. So you might have to pull back a little bit on your training loads because you've got an injured tissue. Right? If you have an injured tissue where the capacity of that tissue is forced to the floor or down into the basement, and you can't load the way you used to do, then you're going to have to regress those loads a little bit because your capacity has dropped. So that means if you're going to load it again, you're going to have to start from a lower level. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But what you have to realize also is that if you can't load the tissue at a local level, so the Achilles or the hamstring, you can't load that, and you can't do low-level loading because of the injury, then there's no way in the world that you're ready to do sport-specific loading. And that's like the running, the jumping, the hard swings of the racket or the club. That's your sport-specific load. There's a massive gap between being injured and having a local tissue problem and being ready for sport-specific loads. And there's a number of ways we can get back to those sport-specific loads. Rest or prolonged rest. There might be a short period of rest to just calm the tissue down. There might be a short period of regressing training loads a little bit before you build them back up. But prolonged rest is definitely not the answer.
That really speaks to how we would use this in sport. For me, load management was, what does that athlete need relative to the demands of their sport? So if I wanted to run a marathon, or if I wanted to start playing golf, start playing pickleball, or for the players I was working with, if you wanted a guy coming back from the off season to start skating, each individual, we know the exact demands of that sport from a force, power, speed of contraction, from a cardiovascular fitness standpoint. Each player was at a different point, and so what they needed from their load or from their training was different. And so we knew that they had to perform here. And we could exceed their capacity in any one of those three ways if they were detrained in power or detrained in cardiovascular fitness. So that speaks to some of this rest piece that you're talking about, where they're detraining. The demands of the sport stay here. And so we actually get further from that. And it was that gap that was already existing that was creating the pain in the tissue. Does that summarize it, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's a different way of talking about overuse, right? So rather than looking at
right,
a lot of people see training load as a cause of injury. That if you train too hard, then you're going to get injured. You're going to get an overuse injury. Look, I think there is some people out there that probably do that. But what you're talking about is not an overuse problem. It's an underuse problem. It's an under preparation problem. You're basically, as an athlete, your capacity is in the basement and you're trying to get to the ceiling. The demands of the sport, that's your ceiling. That's what you've got to do night in, night out. You've got to be ready to perform multiple games in a week on the road over an 82-game season. And if you constantly manage yourself away from training load, we're talking about adaptation and maladaptation. When you expose yourself to training load over a long period of time with adequate rest, and you have highs and lows in your training, then you adapt. You can handle more load at a lower cost. Now, if you constantly manage yourself away from training load, you adapt, but we call it maladaptation. It's a negative response to training, where that same load is coming at a much greater cost. It's a lot harder to do the things that you previously could do easily. And if I often say that if you do that often enough, if you manage yourself away from training load often enough, then you'll get to a point where you bend over to tie your shoelaces and you'll tear your hamstring, because you've got no tolerance to load. You've got no tolerance to movement at all. And the further you manage yourself away from training load, the more your floor becomes like a basement. As you say, the gap between the floor and the ceiling is just getting larger and larger. So it's not necessarily an overuse problem. It's an under preparation problem. And then you end up in what I would call the chronic rehab cycle, where you expose yourself to load. That increases your risk of injury because you're underprepared for what we're about to ask you to do. You get injured, and then when you get injured, you go through this period of low loads again, and you think, oh, well, I don't want to train too hard because that's going to cause me more injury, so you don't train. So then you go, oh, well, I'll go back to sport now because I'm feeling better, but you're underprepared because you haven't trained. So therefore you get injured again. You never get out of that chronic rehab loop because you never train hard enough. You never expose yourself to enough training load to actually protect you from injury.
This was one of the biggest fights that I would have in pro sport. When we introduced our program, it was such a massive shift in how injury was handled, especially in hockey, but I saw it in basketball too, where the athlete wasn't allowed in the weight room until they were cleared by the doc, essentially. And so what we saw was exactly that. You'd have these players they'd be going along, they would get hurt, they would have maybe a 6-month period where they detrained from their sport, and then at 6 months, the doc could go to see the GM and say, okay, he's cleared. Guy was out of pain. The graft was physiologically healed. But that's when we always saw, or even if he didn't get hurt, he was never the same after he tore his ACL. Right? He was never the same after that injury. And I found that it was just incomplete rehab. You didn't finish the job. You didn't take them back to their full capacity before you let them step onto the ice or the court, the field. And I'm seeing the same thing now that I'm out of sport, working with the general population. People are having an injury. They go see the doc, they get the surgery. Essentially, once it's physiologically healed, the doc, he's done his job. You go to PT and insurance pay for your sessions until you're out of pain. And then you're cleared for everything. And over again, the people that are finding us at Vitality Collective now are those people that have been in that exact chronic rehab loop where it's injury, descend a little bit, cleared, re-injury, descend a little more. And people are coming to us with depression and chronic pain and all these different things because we lose sight of what we're actually rehabbing them for. So it's amazing that to hear you describe that phenomenon because we're seeing it every day with these rehab processes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think we tend to think of, sport is where you have athletes, right? But let's broaden our view of our definition of an athlete. And if we define an athlete as someone who has to do physically active tasks, that they have to do athletic movements. And when we think of movements, it could be walking up 3 flights of stairs with 2 bags of groceries as an 80-year-old person. Is that person an athlete? Well, they may not be competing in the NBA, but what they're doing is athletic tasks. They've got all the movements that are pretty similar to what you would see in an athletic population. So let's throw out this idea of only sport has athletes. Let's think of everyone that we come in contact with as being an athlete, and then if we accept that that's a point, then load management, or let's call it effective management and prescription of training load, is going to be applicable to every person that we come in contact with. Everything that we see in sport, everything that you're seeing with your general population that are coming and seeing you and finding you, everything's the same. It's just happening at a slightly different level. It's just that the absolute load that's being applied for the NBA player is just a bit higher than what you're seeing for the 80-year-old grandmother walking up 3 flights of stairs with her 2 bags of groceries.
That's right. It's
just that the principles are exactly the same. It's just that the absolute load that's been applied is a little different. Everything else is the same. So the first thing I'd say is challenge your mindset around what an athlete is. And if you are carrying heavy bags, if you are walking up a number of flights of stairs, if you have to do physical tasks as part of your job, dig holes, lifting boxes, moving boxes, if you're in a job where let's say you're 50 or 55 years old and you're loading and unloading trucks every day, then think of yourself as an athlete, right? And if you can get your head around the fact that you are an athlete, then that means that you can benefit from effective training load and having that training load applied and managed well.
At Vitality Collective, we want people to do the activities that they love for as long as they want to do them. And for some people, that might be living independently. For you to live independently, you need to be able to get up off the ground. You need to be able to get up out of a chair. You need to be able to put your shoes on. You need to be able to carry your groceries up the stairs. All of these things, when you're 90 years old, the relative demands on your system are going to be huge. So, we view it like we need to train for that now. And so that's sort of the sport that I think people can think of themselves as athletes in. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do I want to be able to get up out of my chair? Because, I mean, for me, that's longevity and it's certainly vitality. We say over and over again, these biohacking centers that come up, and they've sort of co-opted the term longevity. But like, do you really think that the vitamin IV that you're getting once a month is going to do anything for you if your quads aren't strong enough to get you out of a chair? Those two things just don't match. For me, it's about avoiding frailty through building a strong and robust body. I mean, we saw it every year in training camp. If an athlete was in the bottom 30% for adductor strength, 2 days into training camp, they had a tendinopathy or some sort of acute pain in their adductors every single year. And so that was our key. And this is how we did load management, for example. After every game, I would look at the training load that had gone on for the last week and the last month. So you would taught us this acute and chronic workload. Basically, it was how much training have you done over a month and how much have you done over a week, sort of stress and fitness, as it were. Whenever we had people who were really low on strength, but higher on stress, those were the guys. That's how we managed load. That guy needed to be on the training table the next day because we knew they didn't have the strength capacity to handle that. And I think for me, that's the same in this real world, is how are we training people back to or for that future level of robustness?
Yeah, I mean, you've raised a few points there, and you've been in this game a long time as well, and you know, we see there's a lot of fads, there's a lot of used car salesmen, and as long as I've been involved in it, there's been something that's always stood the test of time, and that was that you know, something our fathers and probably their fathers before them knew, was that if you train pretty hard, and you give yourself some recovery periods in between those hard sessions, then you get robustness, you get resilience. It's kind of like when you first start a program, it is really hard. Like, it's the hardest thing you've ever done, and it's kind of like when you start swinging an axe for the first time and you get blisters on your hands, right? And you think, geez, this is not very fun at all. This is really awful. Like, I'm getting hurt, I'm getting injured. But if you systematically build up to swinging that axe, don't chop down a whole forest in the first day. Just start with one tree. And then over time, you know, you can build up to 2 trees and 3 trees, and sooner rather than later, those blisters turn into calluses. And that's exactly what happens with training load. You know, you don't go to these really high training loads straight away. You have to build up to those high training loads, and even though elite athletes are trying to win championships, the championship for us now and for people our age and older is how do I keep doing the things that I want to be doing, and how do I age as easily as possible. And that doesn't mean you know, just sitting and relaxing and everything is easy. How do I make these changes that are going to happen to me as I get older? How do I minimize the effect of those changes, the negative impact of those changes? How can I keep doing the things that I want to do and keep enjoying my life as long as possible? And to me, there's a number of little things that you can do. It's pretty hard for people. We are living in the misinformation age. Like, and it's hard if you're unsure where to get your information. It's hard to know, well, what do I believe? Like, let's think about diet. Do I go low carb, high fat, or do I eat healthy pyramid diet? Do I eat plant or animal based proteins? What do I? Everyone who is the advocate, they all say mine's the best. So which one is the best?
Right.
I think you've got some intelligent people that are going to be listening in on this
Mhm,
podcast. So
mhm.
the general advice I'd give you is if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So
Yeah.
if it sounds too good to be true, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. Like just
Mhm,
trust your gut on some of these things. If someone says that they're going
mhm.
to reverse the aging process, and they're going to, you're going to, I don't know. Let's say they're going to freeze you and then you're going to come out of this cryogenic chamber, and then you're going to be 30 years younger. Um, just think about how it sounds, right? If it sounds like it's good to be true, then trust your gut on that one. But here's three
Yeah.
things that I would recommend for your listeners. One is the one thing that I know works and it's stood the test of time is training, right? So what training should we be doing for longevity? And this is evidence based. This comes from research, so it's not something that maybe you'll see it on Instagram, but probably not that often. One is strength training. All right, you want to be um, involved in strength training regularly. Now, it doesn't have to be super heavy. Depending on your age, if you get 2 to 3 sessions a week and you're training at 70% of 1 RM, then 70% and maybe a little bit more, you're improving your strength. That's a big one. So make sure you're doing your strength training.
Mhm,
You want to be doing aerobic activity, and if you think about
mhm,
a base of a pyramid, you want to be doing a fair bit of aerobic activity. So if whatever it is that you can do, if you can walk, then walk. If you can run, then run. But it doesn't have to be super intense. If you're feeling any stress during those activities, you're probably going too fast. So if you want to record the miles that you're doing, don't even look at your watch. Just get out and walk, get out and run, get out and experience nature. And the third thing I'd recommend is just do little bits of high intensity work. Right, so you don't have to do every
mhm,
day
mhm.
a big workout. Um, if you do 1 to 2 high intensity sessions a week, and they're just really short sessions, no more than 20 minutes long, that's more than enough high intensity work. So strength,
Mhm.
aerobic, little bits of high intensity. Now, obviously, that's going to vary depending on your
Mhm.
age. If you're 90 years old, then you're going to have to shift that loading scheme down a little bit, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what you could do when you were 20 or 30 is going to have to look a little bit different from when you're 90, but the
Yeah.
principles are there for you, and this will help you
Yeah.
with your sports as well.
Yeah. So that's such a great bit of practical advice and that's people get sick of hearing me talking about strength, and also power. As we age, if we think about fall prevention, we tend to focus a lot on balance, but people aren't just standing there and fall over, right, and break their hip. It's when we trip. And so for me, power comes in. How quick can you get your foot out from under you? And can you produce force quick enough? Are your quads strong enough to stop you from falling? And can they produce force quick enough to actually put the brakes on? And so I think that's where strength is so underrated in our longevity. And if we think about the big markers for longevity, it's how strong are your quads, these muscles in the front of your legs? How strong is your grip? And what's your VO2 max? How much oxygen can you take in and utilize in your muscles? That for me is what keeps you alive. Everything else is sort of mowing the lawn while your house is on fire.
Yeah. You're right. It's if you're baking a cake, you've got to get your cake right first. And the cake is
Mm-hmm.
you don't put icing on a half cooked cake, or sprinkles on a half cooked
Right.
cake. You get your cake baked first, and then you put your icing on top. So when we talk about doing the one percenters, I'm doing the one percenters, and it could be
Mm-hmm.
the one percenters your IV vitamins. look, it takes a lot of 1%ers to add up to 100%. So you're
Mm-hmm.
getting your training right. They're your 99%ers. Like, if you get that part
Mm-hmm.
right, you're a long way there. You're a long way ahead of anyone else in a similar age, and
Right.
if you can get that part right. And there's so many people out there who will make training more complicated than it needs to be. There's no
Mm-hmm.
shortage of those people. The good ones take something that's complex and can make it simpler, can make it
Mm-hmm.
achievable for everyone. And that's what I would, I'd hope for people who are listening in is don't let yourself get confused by it all. Just think of it in its simplest terms. You want to get strong, you want to have some aerobic fitness, and you want to do a little bit of high intensity work. Now you can program that
Mm-hmm.
throughout the week in a way that also gets you really good adaptations, so that you're getting the recovery. Think about this high low approach, where on some days you want to train harder than others. Now the whole idea there is to
Mm-hmm.
stretch your range a little bit. You want to be disciplined around your low days. Make sure your recovery days are lower. Maybe you do some mobility on those days. You don't have to do nothing, but just do some mobility, because what you do on your low days, if you're disciplined on those low days, it allows your high days to be higher. It allows you to get more out of
Right.
your
Right.
strength session, more out of those high intensity workouts if you want to do high intensity workouts. And I can guarantee you,
Mm-hmm.
when you're on the golf course or you're playing tennis or pickleball, everything will seem so much easier for you. You'll be
Mm-hmm.
on the golf course and you don't get halfway on the course and you're at the ninth hole and you're exhausted. No, you're ready. Your partner, he's struggling because he doesn't do any of these things, and that's when you get your win
Right.
in the back nine holes.
This is a great point, because one of the things that comes up um, is a lot of people who they just want to play their sport. We have a lot of people here in Santa Barbara. They just love being outside. I mean, it's why you live here. So they want to play their sport every day. And then when we talk about coming into the gym, like, well, I'm not really a gym person. I'll just play golf as long as I can. But you see them starting to get little bits and pieces starting to go wrong, right? It's a little sore knee or a sore back or hip or shoulder. And can you speak a little bit to that? Like, why isn't it enough to just go out and play golf? If you're in that loop and you don't really love the gym, what would you say to that person to try and get them into some training?
Well, look, if we think about golf as being sport specific load, just like any other sport specific load, if that's all you do, then you might be able to do the demands of the sport, but you potentially you've got poor local tissue health that's underpinning that,
Mm,
right? So the whole idea of doing a little bit of strength work, in my mind, is we're targeting. Well, let's work our way backwards. We have the sport. We know what the demands of the sport are. Work our way backwards from that. If we know the demands, then we know the physical qualities that are going to be important to perform those demands.
mm,
And then the third step is, well, if we know what the physical qualities are for this particular person in front of us, what are the physical qualities that are limiting performance here? So
mm,
if we've got a sport that requires strength and power, speed and aerobic qualities, we've got a strong athlete, but aerobically they're lacking a little bit of aerobic fitness, then that helps us target that physical quality. Now, when you target it, you strengthen
mm,
that physical quality, then your physical qualities across the board are stronger. The capacity
mm,
across
mm,
all qualities
mm,
are better, which then feeds back to to better performance. It allows you to perform the demands of your sport at a higher level or for longer. Or, if we're talking about some of the people in Santa Barbara, maybe it means longer means for more years, right? That you get to do the things that you want to do for longer. So I would
Yeah.
see the gym work that they do. This is just local tissue loading. They don't have to do a lot of it, but I would see it as being, if you can do that stuff, then what it allows you to do is the higher level stuff, the stuff that you want to do, and it allows you to enjoy that for longer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other benefits that come with it, but I kind of see it as almost like a deposit. It's a deposit in the bank that you're doing without money for a period of time. You're doing without, you're doing something that maybe it's not that enjoyable. I don't like banking. I like having money in my hand. I don't want to put it in the bank, but there's going to be a return somewhere down the track. Right? There's going to be a benefit of doing that down the track. So it's a deposit that you're making into yourself so that you can get a return at a later date.
And again, it comes back to you're training for the demands of your sport, right? And I think there comes a point where we must stress the body so that it can stand up to the forces that are produced, the speed those forces are applied, and how long they're applied for. If we can train for those attributes, that's our longevity within our sport. And it's interesting, one of the reasons we chose Vitality Collective and not Longevity Collective is because we figure if we get you prepared for your sport, as you were saying, there's a whole host of other benefits. But if we prepare you to thrive every single day, you'll get all the other stuff along the way, right? You'll get the longevity. But if all we talk about is keeping you alive, regardless of how you feel, we just sit you in a chair for the last 20 years of your life. Like, we could string you out for a long time. Right? But that's not the point, is it? That's not what we're doing. So let's train for this and get that.
Yeah, no one wants to be old when they're aging. Like,
Right.
Things change. Things change as you go through life, and the way we were as 20-year-olds in competing in sport is different from when we're, say, 40. And then when you get to 50, you start thinking a little bit differently around training load. And okay, well, my mindset changes a little bit now. Maybe I can't do the things that I could when I was 20, but I still want to be doing the things that I'm doing now when I'm 70. And
right.
Yeah, and I just, yes, aging's going to happen. It's going to get us all. But like the trick is, well, how do we make that aging process as pleasant as possible? How do we make it enjoyable? If everyone's living longer, like you say, you don't want to just be living longer and lying in bed or sitting in a chair all day. You want to be doing the stuff you enjoy for as long as possible. That to me, and that to me is why training is it underpins. It's as much a physical thing as a mental thing for me, but it is, and it's not just a lifestyle thing of I'm exercising to stay physically active. No, I'm training because I'm an athlete, right? And my mindset is that I'm going to be doing these athletic things as long as I can. And when I say I'm an athlete, I'm not talking I'm LeBron James athlete. I'm one of those athletes that is going to get through life, and I'm going to be doing things that I want to be doing for as long as possible. You mentioned that I race my son every year. Now, the beauty of that race is that he doesn't win them all, and he's half my age, and he should be beating me every time we race, but if I'm not doing those athletic things, then I'm not going to be getting out and racing my son. That's just not going to be happening. But two, my mindset is when I'm racing my son, I'm going to make sure he knows he's in a race, and I'm going to make sure that if he's going to beat me, he's going to have to work real hard to do it. And when I win, I'm going to make sure that I enjoy the moment, because like, that's if we can't do the things we want to do, and we can't do the things that we enjoy, then what's the point? So that to me is, I want to keep doing that as long as possible, so that when he has kids, maybe I'm still doing it. And when you think about
Maybe you're
it,
racing them.
absolutely, and they'll know they're in a race, right? They're not going to get it for free. They're going to have to work to beat me. That's the mindset. So they're going to have to work for it.
Right.
But let's think a little bit more, like, outside of just ourselves now, like, and that we're improving our quality of life, we're aging better, we're doing the things that we want to do. All right, let's think a little bit broader about the message it sends to so many other people. Like, it sends a message to my son. Wow, what a great role model my dad is. That even at his age, I have to race really hard to beat him. Like, that's a great. And then when the grandkids see it, they go, wow, Nanny and Granddad, they look at them. They're out riding, they're out running, they're surfing, they're they're doing everything. Wow, I want to be just like them, right? But it's not only the family; it's whoever else is in your sphere, your network of people who see you doing the things you do. They go, well, look, if this guy's 50 or 60 or 70 and he's doing the things I'm doing, and I'm 20 and I'm not doing those things, then this is a real good kick in the butt to say, look, I'm going to be his age at some point. I want to start now. Start now, because from 25 things start to decline.
I tell people, like, one of the things that we always do is we set goals. Okay, what do you want to be doing when you're 90? And we hear, pickleball, skiing, all these things, hiking. And then one of the assessments is, can you get off the floor without using your hands? And what I say, when people can't do it, is, what makes you think you'll be playing pickleball when you're 90 if you can't get off the floor today, right? These are things that it's just like, oh my God, where people see their capacity just like shone like a light on them. And it's a real eye-opener for people. And I think that the example piece, like, we've been led to believe that all of these maladaptations are inevitable, right? We're just going to drift off into oblivion. But the people that we've got training in our program, who've been in it for 6, 7 plus months, up to a year, we're seeing guys in their 70s get 75% improvement in quad strength, 50% improvement in grip strength. Skiing, running, tennis, swimming, all of these things pain-free. And they're examples to other people around them, their families. One of the guys I work with at his house, his daughter joined us the other day, and he's pushing it. Same thing. It's so important as a message to their peers, people who are their age. He's such an evangelist for it now, because it's transformed. And I think that ripples out. Everyone that's coming to us is in their late 60s to 70s. Even higher. We got someone in 85 signed up today. And these are all people who want to thrive, right? And it's never too late. People can always do something, always improve. But we've been fed this story that you can't after a certain time. And so I think that's such an important message here. And as we're getting to the end here, Tim, what I want people to go away with, if we're going to start training, right? If somebody wants to start pickleball, how can they monitor their training load, right? If they don't have a GPS system, from Catapult Sports, who, like we did at the team, where do I start with this? What's the simplest thing I can do?
Yeah, well, you're right about your points of we can all improve, right? And and when you have someone who's having trouble getting off the floor and they want to go to pickleball, it's really easy to get trapped in the cycle of, I'm too far away from it. I can't do that, so it's gone. It's gone. That mindset needs to switch. Okay, so straight away, let's think about it. Okay, well, not what I can't do. What can I do? Or and this is more for the person that you're working with is, or I can't do that at the moment. Right? I can't do it at the moment, but that's going to be my goal. Right? I'm going to get off the floor. That's good. And I can guarantee you, if all you need to do is make a step, right? And you take one step, you're on your way. But you got to make the step, and then just focus on one step, right? You take one step. All right. Well, I'm going to focus on one step. So what comes after one step? Another step. The next thing you know, you're not just walking one step, you're walking a mile, and it's a mile further than you've done in a long time. So it just takes little bits of effort to start with, but those little bit of efforts, it takes energy to do it, but so you may not feel like doing it because you haven't done anything for a while. But once you start, it gives you energy back. Your day will feel like you'll finish the session and you'll be on a high. You'll be flying for the day. It gives you a lot. Now, if you want to start a program and you haven't done it in a while, then what I'd say is just start with little bits, right? And if you want to monitor it, you don't need wearable technology. You don't need, even if you're not a numbers person, you don't even have to. You don't even have to have a sophisticated spreadsheet if you don't want to. All you need to think about is, let's see if I can do a little bit more today than I did yesterday, or if I'm going to have a higher intensity session, then make sure I give myself enough recovery in between a similar high intensity dose. So if I'm going to do something that's reasonably intense on Monday, then maybe Tuesday go a little bit easier before you, and then when you come back on Wednesday, if you're feeling good, if you're not too sore by Wednesday, then you can probably go back and do something again. Now, when I say too sore, it's okay if you haven't done anything in a while. If you feel a little bit sore and a little bit stiff after doing your first training session back, that's okay. It's normal, right? It's normal to feel a little bit sore. But if you're feeling intense pain and you can't go into certain ranges, then that's probably an indication that you might have overdone it a little bit. So use that information to say, okay, well, rather than doing more the next time I come back, maybe I just need to back off a little bit, and you're just trying to find what is an appropriate edge. If you haven't done anything for a while, it's going to take a little while to work out what that edge is. So just expose yourself to a little bit of work, check how you feel after the session and the next day. If you're feeling pretty good, then that's a pretty good indication that I can add a little bit more training, a little bit more training time, or another rep, a little bit more weight, and that's pretty much how you can monitor your training response. Put some load on, check the response, and then decide whether you're going to load again.
I love that, Tim. It's so simple and takes us back to the days before we all had these watches on that tells us, it tells us how we feel after we slept. It tells us how we feel after we train, right? It tells us how many steps we should get. I think I went deep into that in sport and started swinging back away from it. I think because the first person that needs to tell you how you feel is you. We would have all these different monitoring systems for the athletes, and it might have been you who actually said, well, if you want to know how the athlete feels, have you thought about asking them? Because they might tell you, right? And so rather than all these complex equations and what does my Garmin say or my Apple Watch, how do you feel? Did you sleep okay? Right? If you feel refreshed, you probably did. And then use the tech to verify if you need to. Right? If similar to what you said before, if it checks out, if it passes the sniff test, I feel great. This tells me I should feel great. Good. But if you feel great, don't be fooled into feeling bad because it tells you don't.
Yeah, look, I mean, he was an elite player. He was a water polo player, and they were asked to wear a particular watch or band. And he came to session on the Friday, and we had a high intensity session planned. And we spoke to him about it. He was involved in the planning of it, and he said, "Do you really think we should do it?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, I'm fatigued." And I said, "What do you mean you're fatigued?" And he said, "Well, I've been wearing the band, and it says I'm fatigued and I need to rest. I need to unload." And I said, "Well, what do you think? How do you feel?" And he said, "Well, I feel pretty good. Like it's funny because I've slept well. I feel recovered. I feel relaxed. I feel ready to train." I said, "Well, look, if you feel like you're ready to train, let's train."
Should we do that?
I think some people, they use the wearables and let the wearables dictate to them how they should be feeling, and like you say, like if you want to know how your athlete's feeling, just ask them. They'll tell you.
Exactly. Well, Tim, I think on that note, we will we'll wrap up. Before we do sign off, where can people find you? Get in contact or read more of your work and learn more about this topic?
Look, I think the first place is just to go to the website. They can contact me through the website. So if they go to gabbetperformance.com, they can send an email through there. But other than that, I do put some stuff on social media occasionally. I'm a little bit slower on social media. I prefer the older platforms. So I'm a little bit old school in that.
Where can they write you a letter?
Yeah, I still, if they've got a landline, they can call me. And look, I'm a bit old school in that I still prefer genuine, real life conversations. That's a little bit different from what happens on social media these days, but that's the way I prefer things. I still prefer shaking someone's hand, and a firm handshake for me is pretty important. So if that dictates how old I am or gives a hint of how old I am, then I'm okay with that. But yeah, that's probably the best way to contact me is just through the website, or they can follow me on different social medias. But the website's the best place.
Great. Well, Michelle and I will work on our grip strength for when we next see you, and take you for some ice cream here in Santa Barbara. We've got so much out of this, and our listeners will have benefited from this. Hopefully, it'll really help them with their rehabs or really performing at their best in their activities. So, thanks so much for taking the time to come on. And thanks everyone for tuning in and listening to this episode.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jez.
What an incredible conversation with Professor Tim Gabbett on how to train smarter and stay injury-free. Here are 3 key takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, training load management is about balancing effort and recovery, not just resting when you're tired. Number 2, underuse injury happens more often than overuse injuries. Staying active builds resilience. Number 3, everybody is an athlete. Whether you're carrying groceries or competing professionally, your body thrives on well-managed training. If today's discussion resonated with you and you're looking for ways to optimize your training, prevent injuries, and extend your active years, we're here to help. At Vitality Collective, we've developed a system designed to help you build strength, stay injury-free, and perform at your best no matter your age. Ready to take action? Visit www.vitality-collective.com to learn more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.